Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the mess up in the scheduling. This week's parsha is Parshas Vayeira, Tavshin Pei Hey. We will begin from the beginning of the parsha, Perek Yud Ches, chapter 18, Pasuk Aleph, verse 1. Now, it's important to bear in mind for what we're going to discuss that last week's parsha ended off when Hashem told Abraham that he should have a bris milah, he should have circumcision, his son Yishmael, and all the male members of his house. And the last verse, or the last two verses of Parshas Lech Lecha, which is Perek Yud Zayin, chapter 17, Pasuk Chavav, verse 26, Be'etzem hayom hazeh, on this very day, Nimal Abraham was circumcised, Yishmael b'nai, Yishmael his son. Chalan Shei Basin, all the members of his household, Yelid Bayis, those born in his house, Umikdas Kesem Meis Benechar, are those purchased with money from other people, Nimaylu Itoi, were all circumcised with him. So that's the end of last week's parsha. Now our parsha begins, Vayeira love Hashem Beloine Mamre. Hashem appeared to him in the plains of Mamre, who was sitting at the opening of the tent by the heat of the day. Now we're going to focus on the first half of the pasuk, where it says, Vayeira love Hashem, Hashem appeared to him in the plains of Mamre. That's all it says. All it says is he appeared to him. Did he say anything to him? Did he have any conversation with him? Doesn't say. It just says Hashem appeared. And therefore the question is, what exactly was the purpose of this appearance? Was there did Hashem deliver a message? What happened? So Rashi comments on these words, Vayeira Elav, he appeared to him, Levaker es ha'chayla. Hashem was coming to visit the sick. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Yom Shlishi l'Meilasa haya. This was the third day of Abraham having his bris done, which we know is the most difficult day after a bris. Hashem came and inquired about his welfare, which sounds like Hashem came and asked Abraham, how are you feeling? That's what it sounds like. That's the words. The words just read literally, Hashem came and asked in his welfare, inquired about his welfare. Hashem was setting an example for us, visiting the sick. Hashem knows how Abraham was feeling, but it was for Abraham's sake that he came and he, so to speak, inquired about his welfare. Now, again, in the pasuk, there's no conversation going on here. So is Rashi telling us, and this is based on the Talmud in Bab Metzia, is Bab Metzia saying there was conversation here? So actually, the commentary of Maharsha in Bab Metzia says there was no conversation here. There was no conversation. Even though it says Sha'al b'shloimei, there was no conversation. But what it would mean is that Hashem came to Abraham. Today was the third day of his bris milah, and Hashem came. Abraham understood why he came. Hashem came, so to speak, to come see how he was doing. Like if somebody is ill, another person comes in and checks up on him and see how he's doing. This is what Hashem was doing also. You know, Hashem was doing what we would be doing, coming to visit the sick. So according to Rashi, Hashem appeared to Abraham. Any conversation, any message? No. But it was a visit. He was visiting the sick. Which actually means, if we're, according to the way we're saying, is that what we see from here is an important lesson about visiting the sick. Which is, if you visit someone and they're sick, of course it's nice to have a conversation. But what if you have nothing to say? Let's say there's really no words to exchange. Is there any point of being there? And the answer is yes. Because when you come to visit the sick person, even if for whatever reason there's no talking that goes on, you're showing the person that you're thinking about them, you care about them, you want to be with them, and that is what really matters. You're showing that you care. You come to see how they are. You're coming to show them you're there for them. That is the most important thing when it comes to visiting the sick. And that's what Hashem is doing here, according to Rashi. Now, clearly, we have a connection. Vayeira Hashem Elav connects with last week's parsha that spoke about Abraham having a bris. Okay, and now Hashem appeared to him in connection with that to see how it was doing on the third day, which is the most difficult of days. The commentary of Sefornu has a different explanation here. And he explains the following. On the words, Vayeira lav Hashem Eloinei Mamre. Hashem appeared to him in the plains of Mamre. So says the Sefornu, Ki sham nimal Avraham uz. The plains of Mamre, this was the name of the place. This is where Avraham had then had his circumcision done. V'chol beis nimal itai. And his whole household also, together with him, were circumcised. Sham haifia hakel yispar shchinasai. It was there that Hashem brought forth his divine presence. Lamed bebris, to stand at the covenant, to be at the covenant, kamishma l'chol karisei bris, like we find by all people who create a covenant, a treaty between each other. If two parties have a treaty, a peace treaty, some kind of a covenant, some kind of an agreement, some kind of a treaty, both parties are present. That's when you make a treaty. Both parties are present. So bris Milah, which is the word for circumcision, we call it Brit. It's called bris Milah. It's called the covenant of Milah. That's what Hashem calls it in last week's parsha. Bris Milah, when Avram was doing his brit, had his bris done, he and his whole household, they were entering into a covenant, into a treaty with Hashem. Well, if it's a covenant with Hashem, then Hashem needs to be present. So therefore, says the Sefornu, what's happening here is, the end of last week's parsha says, Avram and his whole household had a circumcision done. So a bris was taking place, a covenant was taking place. So Hashem showed up. Hashem was there. His divine presence was there because this is Hashem being at the treaty. When two parties make a treaty, both parties are present when it's made. Avraham was when the bris milah was done. Avram did the bris milah, and now Hashem was present because there was a bris, there was a treaty going on here. So Vayeira love Hashem. Hashem appeared to him. Wasn't about any kind of message or to say anything. Hashem was there because any time two parties make a covenant, make a treaty, both parties are present when it's made, and this is what's happening by the bris milah. By Milah, there is a covenant taking place between Abraham and his household and Hashem. And therefore, Hashem is there.
It means not Saturday.
Very good. Excellent. According to Sefornu, right, it would come out that it wasn't on the third day, it was the day. It's a direct connection to the end of last week's parsha. Last week's parsha says Abraham's household were circumcised, and Hashem appeared right then and there. Hashem's divine presence. That was Hashem being there is represented with his divine presence, his Shekhinah. And that he was there. You're right. According to the Sefornu, it's not working like the Gemara says the third day. It would be that day itself. Okay? Now, the Sefornu continues and says the following. And this is a very interesting idea. I'm skipping a little bit in the Sefornu. I'm going to the end. And perhaps it's because of this reason there is a custom to prepare a special chair at a bris milah. What's the matter? Okay. You ever notice that by a bris milah? There's a special chair there? Now, at a bris milah, we have to have a chair for the person who's going to be sitting and holding the baby, right, when the bris is done on the baby. But there's another chair next to him. What's it for? Says the Sefornu, you know what it's for? Because the Shekhinah is there. The Shekhinah comes to the bris. And therefore, we prepare a chair because we have a very special guest here. Now, if you say that, there's another very important point to bring out. It's an obvious point according to the Sefornu, but a very important point, and that's the following: Hashem told Abraham that when you do bris milah, there's going to be a covenant between me and you and all your generations. That's what Hashem said. It'll be a covenant between myself, you, and all your generations. So how does it work? Does it work that Hashem made a treaty with Abraham? And that treaty between Hashem and Abraham continues to his descendants. Meaning when this treaty was made, it was a treaty for Abraham and his descendants. But the treaty was made with Abraham one time, and that treaty now continues with all his descendants. Is that what happens? Or every time a bris takes place, the treaty is being made again. Every bris is a treaty between the bris and Hashem. Each time. Every time. According to Sefornu, which way is it?
Second.
Every time. Because if we're preparing a chair for the Shechina, that means every time there's a bris, the Shechina is there. And why is the Shechina there, according to Sefornu? Because a covenant is taking place, and two parties of every covenant are present when the covenant is made. So every bris is a new covenant between that baby, that child, and Hashem, which is a very powerful idea, that in every bris, the Shechina is present. Now, what's important to point out is that we have a name for that chair. That chair, we have a name for it. Now, what happens by bris is that the baby is brought in, the baby is put down on that chair, and after that, the baby is removed from the chair and put on the lap of the person who's going to be holding the baby during the bris. That chair, we have a name for it. It's called Kisei Shel Eliyahu. It is the chair of Eliyahu, the chair of Elijah the prophet. We have a tradition, we have a source for it, that Eliyahu Hanavi is present at every bris. And the chair that we put up is for Eliyahu Hanavi.
It's not chair, Abraham's chair?
Nope. Avram's chair?
This is Abraham.
No.
No?
No. It's called Kisei Shel Eliyahu, the chair of Eliyahu. Now, the Sefornu doesn't even mention that. Sefornu doesn't mention Eliyahu. Sefornu says, because of his whole discussion about the Shechina being present at a bris, that's why we have a chair. No mention of Eliyahu. So maybe you'll say, Eliyahu represents Hashem. The only thing is that that's not what happened here by Abraham. It wasn't Eliyahu. It says the Shechina was there. And the Sefornu says, and the Shechina is, and the same idea, the Sefornu seems to say, the Shechina continues throughout all generations. So it doesn't seem like the Sefornu is working with the idea of the chair being the Kisei Shel Eliyahu. But we do call it Kisei Shel Eliyahu because we believe that Eliyahu Navi is present at every bris. So we prepare a chair for him to show that he's there. Why does Eliyahu Navi come to every bris? Why? So there's a medrash. The medrash is called the medrash of Pirkei Rebbe Lezer that says the following. Now, in Malachim Aleph in Book of Kings 1 or 1 Kings, I'm not sure if it goes Kings 1 or 1 Kings. How are you supposed to say it? But there's a story there about Eliyahu Hanavi who had to run away from the wicked queen Izebel. During the times of Eliyahu Hanavi, there was a king named Achav. Achav had a queen, a wife named Izebel. You know what Izebel? What name does Izebel sound like? Isabel. Okay, we knew of another wicked queen, Isabel. Okay, now, so
Isabel.
Yeah, it's the same name.
From Spain?
Yeah, it's the same name.
Okay.
Now, Izebel was very wicked. She was worse than her husband. Her husband was very wicked, and she was worse than him. She wanted to kill Eliyahu Hanavi. And Eliyahu Hanavi had to run away from her. And at one point, Eliyahu Hanavi came, and I believe he went to hide in Har Sinai. That was the mountain he was hiding in. And it was there that Hashem appeared to him and said, Eliyahu Hanavi, Malach Hapai, Eliyahu, what are you doing here? And Eliyahu Hanavi says, I don't have the words in front of me, Eliyahu Hanavi says, Kanoi kinesi l'Hashem. I was very zealous. I acted very zealously, very strongly in the honor of Hashem. Because, and I will elaborate soon on that, because I have acted very zealously for Hashem, because ki heferu espris. It says that they didn't keep the covenant, and they destroyed the altar, etc. And Hashem tells Eliyahu Hanavi to go back. Now, the Brit Rebbe Lezer tells us a little bit more what was going on. Because it's not all what the Brit Rebbe Lezer says adds to what the book of Kings says. And the Brit Rebbe Lezer says that we know that the kingdom of the Jewish people at one point split into two. There was the Malchus Yisrael, the Israelite kingdom, and the Malchus Yehuda, the Judean kingdom. Originally, it was only the Judean kingdom of the Davidic dynasty, and then it was a split. And sometimes that kingdom, that other kingdom, is called the Malchus Yisrael, the Israelite kingdom. It's also referred to as the Malchus of Ephraim, of the tribe of Ephraim, because the first king of that new kingdom was a man named Yeravam ben Nevat, who was from the tribe of Ephraim, and he basically steered the Jewish people into idol worship, all for the purposes of preserving his status as the king of that kingdom. And the Pirkei Eliezer says that the Malchus Yisrael, the Israelite kingdom, stopped the Jewish people from performing bris milah. That's what it says. They stopped them from performing circumcision. And because of that, Eliyahu Hanavi decreed a drought. He prayed there should be a drought, and that brought a drought. And when the queen Izebel heard about that, she wanted to kill him, and that's why he ran away. Now, when she runs away, and Hashem appears to him, and it says, Eliyahu, what are you doing here? That's just a way of opening the conversation. Eliyahu Hanavi says, I was zealous for your honor. I stood up for your honor because the people are not keeping the bris. Which, according to Pirkei Eliezer, means that Eliyahu Hanavi was saying to Hashem, they're not keeping Milah, they're not keeping the mitzvah bris milah, they're not keeping that covenant, and therefore I stood up in your honor. I stood up very strongly in your honor, and I decreed a drought. And Hashem responds, according to the Medrash, Hashem was not happy with that. Hashem was not happy with the fact that Eliyahu Hanavi said that the Jewish people are not keeping the mitzvah of Milah. They're not keeping the covenant of Milah. And because of that, he told Eliyahu, from now on, anytime there's a bris on the Jewish people, you have to be there. You have to witness it. You said the Jewish people are not keeping bris milah. They're not keeping that covenant. And therefore, from now on, at every bris milah, you have to be there. And the Zohar says that Hashem said to him that the mouth that said that the Jewish people aren't keeping the covenant of circumcision of Milah is now going to have to come to every bris and testify that they're keeping it. Now, there's a lot to discuss here exactly what this means. What did he say wrong exactly on Eliyahu Hanavi? I mean, the Pirkei Eliezer says they weren't keeping it. So what was wrong when he said they weren't keeping it? So the only thing I could think of, I'll just suggest, was the fact that first of all it says that it was only the kingdom of Israel, the Israelite kingdom, that wasn't keeping bris milah. The other kingdom, it doesn't say weren't doing it. So how do you say your people, your nation aren't keeping it? There were people keeping it. It's also very possible that perhaps even though officially the Israelite kingdom was telling people, was holding people back from doing bris milah, perhaps secretly there were people doing it. There were people like that in history, right? When the law said not to have a bris milah, they had a secret one. Maybe that was happening in the times of Eliyahu Hanavi also. And it could have very well been that the majority of people were not having a bris milah, but it could be there were people that were. And Eliyahu Hanavi shouldn't have made that kind of statement. They're not keeping. What do you mean? There are people that are keeping. So it needs explanation. I don't have a clear explanation for it. But that's the reason why we have the Kisei Shel Eliyahu. That's why we have that chair that we call the chair of Eliyahu Hanavi. It's the chair of Eliyahu Hanavi because Eliyahu Hanavi was told that you now, because you said the Jewish people were not keeping the covenant of Milah, you now have to be present at every bris milah and testify to the fact that they are keeping it. And therefore, we set up the chair of Eliyahu Hanavi to say Eliyahu Hanavi is present here at the bris milah.
But this is only reason.
For Eliyahu.
Only reason for this story.
What do you mean for this story?
No, but the story talk about him, and this is we believe he comes here for Brit only from this story.
Yes.
There is no anything.
No, this is it. This is the source.
It's Midrash.
Yeah, but this is the source, and this is the practice that we do. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch to do that practice.
But Midrash is not all of this
Medrash is to be highly respected.
Yes.
Highly respected. The question is, if there's kind of questions and this and that, how do you deal with the questions? But we don't just ignore Midrash. We don't just say, oh, it's just stories. Chas v'shalom. This Medrash comes from the sages, and there's no argument about this Medrash. It's not like, sometimes Midrashim have arguments, different of opinions, how something came up. There's no argument about it. This is this. I mean, it's found in the Pirkei Rebbe Lezer, and this is a medrash. We accept the medrash. We have no reason not to, and we should accept the medrash because it's medrash. It's the words of our sages, and based on this, we have that practice that we have the chair there to represent the fact Eliyahu Hanavi is coming. So according to our practice, we say it's Eliyahu Hanavi. The Sefornu says it's the Shechina. It's divine presence of Hashem that's there. That's why we're praying the chair. Either way, there are some very, very, very special guests, so to speak, at a bris milah that makes being at a bris milah a very, very special and holy experience. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for listening.